The morning sun cast long shadows across the abandoned warehouse district when Maya Chen first saw the smoke rising from the old textile factory. She pulled her motorcycle to a stop, engine ticking as it cooled, and watched the dark plume twist into the Detroit sky. Something about it felt wrong, too controlled, too deliberate for an accident. Maya had been investigating corporate cover-ups for the Detroit Free Press for 8 years, and her instincts rarely steered her wrong. The Hartwell Textile Company had been shuttered for 3 years, ever since the scandal broke about their illegal dumping of chemical waste into the Detroit River. The company had paid hefty fines, the executives had walked away with golden parachutes, and the building had been left to rot. So why was someone burning something inside it now? She pulled out her phone and snapped a few photos, then noticed a black sedan parked behind a chain-link fence about 100 yards away. The windows were tinted, but she could make out 2 figures inside. Corporate security, maybe. Or worse. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "Stop digging or you'll find more than you bargained for." Maya's blood ran cold. She'd been getting anonymous threats for weeks, ever since she'd started investigating the connections between Hartwell Textile and Nexus Industries, the massive conglomerate that had quietly bought up half the factories in Detroit over the past decade. Someone clearly didn't want her connecting the dots. She revved her motorcycle and headed back toward downtown, but kept checking her mirrors. The black sedan was following her, staying just far enough back to seem casual. When she turned onto Jefferson Avenue, it turned too. When she pulled into a coffee shop parking lot, it drove past, but she spotted it again when she came out 20 minutes later. That evening, Maya spread her research across the kitchen table of her small apartment in Corktown. Photos, documents, newspaper clippings, and printed emails covered every surface. She'd been building this case for months, and the pattern was becoming clear. Nexus Industries hadn't just bought up Detroit's old factories, they'd systematically destroyed evidence of environmental crimes, silenced whistleblowers, and corrupted local officials to cover their tracks. The root of it all was Marcus Hartwell, the former CEO of Hartwell Textile, who now sat on Nexus's board of directors. He'd orchestrated the whole thing, using his connections and Nexus's resources to bury the truth about the chemical dumping. The official story was that Hartwell Textile had acted alone, but Maya had evidence suggesting Nexus had been involved from the beginning. She picked up a photo of Hartwell from a corporate event last year. He looked smug, comfortable, like a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. That was about to change. Her laptop chimed with a new email. The subject line read, "You're making a mistake." Maya opened it, expecting another anonymous threat, but this one was different. It was from Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, a former Nexus employee who'd been fired 2 years ago for asking too many questions about the company's environmental practices. "Maya, I saw your article about Hartwell Textile. I have information you need to see. Can we meet? I'm scared they're going to come for me next. Sarah." Maya typed back immediately, "When and where?" The response came within minutes: "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Belle Isle Park, near the fountain. Come alone and make sure you're not followed." Maya barely slept that night. She kept thinking about the smoke from the factory, the sedan that had tailed her, and the growing sense that she was closer to something big than she'd ever been. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of fire consuming everything in its path, leaving only ash and silence behind. The next day, Maya arrived at Belle Isle Park 30 minutes early. She chose a bench with a clear view of the fountain and the surrounding area, checking every face, every movement. Detroit's skyline glittered across the water, but she barely noticed. Her attention was focused on staying alive long enough to get the story. Dr. Rodriguez appeared at exactly 2 p.m., looking nervous and constantly glancing over her shoulder. She was a small woman in her 50s, with graying hair and the kind of tired eyes that came from carrying too many secrets. "Thank you for meeting me," Sarah said, sitting down beside Maya. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I'm here," Maya replied. "What do you have for me?" Sarah pulled a USB drive from her purse. "Everything I could save before they fired me. Financial records, internal emails, test results they buried. Nexus didn't just know about the chemical dumping, they ordered it. Marcus Hartwell was following direct instructions from the board." Maya felt her heart racing.
This proves they were involved from the beginning? More than that.
It proves they've been doing this for years, at dozens of sites across the Midwest. The Hartwell factory was just the tip of the iceberg. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. They've poisoned entire communities, Maya. And they've been covering it up with a network of shell companies, bribed officials, and worse.
Worse? Sarah's hands were shaking now. People who got too close to the truth, they disappeared. Not all of them, but enough to send a message. A factory worker in Toledo who was documenting illegal waste disposal. A city inspector in Cleveland who refused to take their money. A journalist in Milwaukee who was investigating their practices. Maya's blood turned to ice. What happened to them? The factory worker died in a car accident. The inspector had a heart attack. The journalist overdosed. Sarah looked directly at Maya.
None of them had a history of heart problems or drug use. And the factory workers' brakes had been tampered with.
Jesus, Maya breathed. Do you have proof? Some. But not enough to take them down in court. That's why I'm giving this to you.
You're better positioned to get the story out there, to make people pay attention.
Maya pocketed the USB drive. Why come forward now? Why risk it? Sarah's expression hardened. Because they're about to do it again. There's a new site in Flint, a former auto parts factory. They're planning to dump mercury and other heavy metals into the groundwater.
The community is already dealing with the water crisis from years ago, and this will make it 10 times worse.
When? Soon. Maybe within the week. That's why I couldn't wait any longer. Sarah stood up. Be careful, Maya. These people play for keeps. And whatever you do, don't trust anyone at City Hall. Half of them are on Nexus's payroll. Before Maya could ask any more questions, Sarah was walking away, disappearing into the crowd of park visitors.
Maya sat alone on the bench, clutching the USB drive and trying to process what she'd just learned. She was so focused on her thoughts that she almost didn't notice the man in the dark jacket who'd been watching them from behind a nearby tree. When she looked up, he was gone, but her instincts were screaming. She'd been made. Maya waited another 10 minutes, then casually walked back to her motorcycle. She took a circuitous route home, doubling back twice and stopping at random locations to check for surveillance. She didn't see the sedan, but that didn't mean she was safe. Back in her apartment, Maya loaded the USB drive into her laptop. What she saw made her stomach turn. Hundreds of documents, thousands of pages of evidence showing a systematic pattern of environmental crimes spanning 20 years. Internal memos discussing how to manage community activists and neutralize troublesome officials. Financial records showing payments to politicians, judges, and law enforcement officials across 5 states. And at the center of it all was Marcus Hartwell, not just as a board member but as the architect of the entire operation. He'd been running this scheme since before he even joined Nexus, using his position at Hartwell Textile as a testing ground for methods that would later be deployed across the company's network. Maya worked through the night, cross-referencing documents, verifying sources, and building her case. By dawn, she had enough evidence to destroy Nexus Industries and put dozens of people behind bars. But she also knew that publishing the story would paint a target on her back the size of a billboard. She was about to send the draft article to her editor when her phone rang. The caller ID showed her editor's number, but when she answered, a different voice spoke. Miss Chen, my name is David Walsh. I represent certain interests that would prefer your current investigation remain unpublished. Maya's hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? We get whatever we need, Ms. Chen. The question is whether you're smart enough to walk away from this story while you still can. And if I'm not? Then you'll join the others who thought they could take on forces bigger than themselves. The factory worker in Toledo sends his regards. Oh wait, he can't. He's dead. The line went dead. Maya stared at her phone, her heart hammering against her ribs. They weren't just threatening her, they were confessing to murder. She grabbed her laptop and the USB drive, threw some clothes into a backpack, and headed for the door. She needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere she could finish the story and publish it before they could stop her. But as she opened her apartment door, she found herself face to face with two men in dark suits. They were big, professional looking, and they didn't seem interested in conversation.
"Miss Chen," the taller one said, "we need to have a chat."
Maya slammed the door and ran for the fire escape. She could hear them breaking down her door as she climbed onto the metal platform outside her kitchen window. She clattered down the stairs, laptop bag bouncing against her hip, and hit the alley running. Her motorcycle was parked half a block away. She could see it, but she could also see another black sedan positioned to block her exit. They'd been watching her, waiting for her to make a move. Maya ducked into the narrow space between two buildings, pressing herself against the brick wall and trying to think. She needed to get to a public place, somewhere with witnesses and security cameras. But more importantly, she needed to get the story out before they could stop her. She pulled out her phone and started typing frantically, uploading the most damning documents to a cloud storage account and sending copies to 3 different news outlets. If something happened to her, at least the evidence would survive. Footsteps echoed in the alley. They were getting closer. Maya spotted a fire escape ladder on the building across from her. She sprinted across the alley, leaped, and caught the bottom rung. The ladder groaned under her weight but held. She climbed quickly, hearing shouts below as her pursuers realized where she'd gone. From the rooftop, Maya could see the entire neighborhood. The black sedans were positioned at every major intersection, cutting off her escape routes. But she also saw something else, a news van parked outside the coffee shop where she'd stopped the day before. Channel 7 was doing a story about neighborhood revitalization. Maya ran across the rooftop, jumped a narrow gap to the next building, and made her way toward the news van. If she could reach it, she could get on camera and tell her story. Even if they killed her afterward, the truth would be out there. She climbed down another fire escape and emerged onto the street 2 blocks from the news van. She walked quickly but tried to look casual, just another resident going about her day. But she could feel eyes on her, could sense the net closing around her. The news van was 50 feet away when Maya heard the screech of tires. A black sedan was racing toward her, and she could see the barrel of a gun protruding from the passenger window. Maya dove behind a parked car just as the first shots rang out. The news crew scattered, but their camera kept rolling. Maya realized this was her chance. If she was going to die, she was going to make sure it was on live television. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, then started shouting at the top of her lungs. "This is Maya Chen from the Detroit Free Press. I'm being shot at by agents of Nexus Industries because I discovered evidence of their environmental crimes. They've been poisoning communities for 20 years and murdering anyone who tries to expose them." More shots peppered the car she was hiding behind. She could hear police sirens in the distance, but she didn't know if they'd arrive in time. "The evidence is on my laptop and in cloud storage," she continued shouting. "Marcus Hartwell is the mastermind. He's been running a criminal enterprise with the full knowledge of Nexus Industries." The shooting stopped. Maya heard car doors slamming and footsteps running. When she looked up, the black sedan was gone, but the news camera was still rolling. The police arrived within minutes, followed by paramedics and more news crews. Maya was unhurt but shaken. She gave her statement to the police, handed over copies of her evidence, and watched as the story began to spread across social media. By evening, it was national news. The video of Maya being shot at while shouting her accusations had gone viral, and major news outlets were picking up the story. Nexus Industries' stock price plummeted, and FBI agents were already serving search warrants at their corporate headquarters. But Maya knew the fight was far from over. She'd cut the root of their operation, exposed the conspiracy, and started the process of bringing them to justice. But she hadn't extinguished the flame, the burning desire for truth that had driven her to risk everything. 3 weeks later, Maya sat in a secure FBI safe house, watching the news coverage of Marcus Hartwell's arrest. The former CEO was led away in handcuffs, his smug expression replaced by the hollow look of a man who'd finally been held accountable for his actions. "Feels good, doesn't it?" said Agent Jennifer Morrison, the FBI investigator who'd been assigned to Maya's case.
It's a start, Maya replied. But this is bigger than just Hartwell and Nexus. There are other companies, other networks, other communities being poisoned as we speak. Agent Morrison nodded. The investigation is expanding.
Your evidence has opened up cases in 12 states. This is going to take years to untangle.
Good, Maya said. I'll be here for all of it. Over the following months, Maya's reporting continued to expose the full scope of the conspiracy.
Dozens of executives were arrested, hundreds of millions in fines were levied, and new environmental protections were put in place. The Flint site was cleaned up before any dumping could occur, and communities across the Midwest finally got the justice they deserved. But the real victory came when Maya received a letter from a group of children in Toledo, the same city where the factory worker had been murdered for trying to expose the truth. They'd written to thank her for cleaning up their river, for making their neighborhood safe again, for showing them that one person could make a difference.
Maya kept that letter on her desk as she continued her investigations.
Because she'd learned something important in those dark weeks when her life was on the line. They could cut the root, silence the voices, and try to bury the truth. But they couldn't extinguish the flame that burned in people who refused to accept injustice. The flame that had driven her to risk everything for the truth. The flame that would keep burning as long as there were stories to tell and wrongs to right. The flame that would light the way for others who chose to stand up against corruption and power. Maya stood on the shore of the Detroit River, watching the sun set over the water. It was cleaner now, thanks to the massive cleanup effort funded by the settlement money from Nexus Industries. Fish were returning to waters that had been poisoned for decades. Children played in parks that had been contaminated by illegal dumping.
The city was healing.
But Maya's work wasn't finished. She'd received tips about similar operations in other cities, other companies using the same playbook that Hartwell had perfected. The Hydra had many heads, and cutting off one only revealed the others. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Rodriguez. There's something else you need to know.
Can we meet? Maya smiled.
Sarah had become a key witness in the federal case against Nexus, and her testimony had helped secure convictions for a dozen executives.
But apparently, she wasn't done revealing secrets. When and where? Maya typed back.
Tomorrow, same place.
And Maya? This one's even bigger than Nexus. Maya pocketed her phone and took one last look at the river.
The water sparkled in the dying light, alive and clean in a way it hadn't been for 30 years. It was proof that change was possible, that justice could prevail, that ordinary people could defeat powerful institutions when they refused to give up. She walked back to her motorcycle, already planning her next investigation. Because that's what journalists did, they kept digging, kept asking questions, kept holding power accountable.
They might cut the root, but they couldn't kill the flame. The flame burned eternal, passed from one generation of truth-tellers to the next, ensuring that darkness could never fully triumph over light.
And Maya Chin would keep that flame burning for as long as she drew breath.
1 year after the initial arrests, Maya received an unexpected visitor at her new office at the Detroit Free Press.
Marcus Hartwell, out on bail pending his appeal, walked through her door like he owned the place. "Miss Chen," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk without invitation.
"I thought it was time we had a proper conversation." Maya kept her expression neutral, though her hand moved instinctively toward the panic button under her desk.
"I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Hartwell."
"Oh, but I have plenty to say to you."
Hartwell's voice was calm, almost conversational.
"You think you won, don't you? You think you brought down the big bad corporation and saved the day. I think I exposed the truth about what you and your company did to innocent people." Hartwell laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Innocent people? Ms. Chen, there are no innocent people in this world. There are only those with power and those without it. You had a moment of power, and you used it well. I respect that. Is that why you're here? To congratulate me? I'm here to offer you a job." Maya blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me? You're wasted in journalism.
You have intelligence, determination, and most importantly, you understand how the game is really played. Nexus Industries is restructuring, bringing in new leadership, adopting new practices. We need someone with your skills to help us rebuild our reputation.
You're offering me a job at the company I just destroyed? The company you helped evolve. Maya, do you really think Nexus was the only player in this game? Do you think shutting us down solved the problem?
Hartwell leaned forward, his eyes bright with a kind of evangelical fervor. We were just one tentacle of a much larger organism. By destroying us, you've simply forced the others to adapt, to become more careful, more sophisticated.
Maya felt a chill run down her spine. What are you talking about?
The chemical dumping continues, Ms. Chen. The bribes still flow. The cover-ups still happen. The only difference is that now they're being done by companies you've never heard of, in places you've never been, using methods you couldn't possibly detect.
You're lying. Am I? Then explain why the EPA's enforcement actions dropped by 60% in the 6 months after our arrests. Explain why environmental violations are being plea-bargained down to meaningless fines.
Explain why the communities you thought you saved are still getting sick.
Maya's hands clenched into fists. Because the system is corrupt. Because people like you have spent decades undermining it. Exactly.
Hartwell slapped the desk, his composure cracking for the first time. And that system is still there, still functioning, still protecting the people who really matter. You cut down one tree and thought you'd saved the forest.
But the forest is vast, Ms. Chen, and it has deep roots. Then I'll keep cutting. Will you? How many more years of your life are you willing to sacrifice? How many more death threats are you willing to endure? How many more times are you willing to watch guilty people walk free while you struggle to build cases that will never stick?
Maya stood up, her chair scraping against the floor.
Get out of my office.
I'm offering you a chance to work from the inside, to make real change instead of just writing stories that people will forget in a week. You could have influence, resources, the ability to actually fix things instead of just complaining about them.
By working for the people who created the problems in the first place?
By working with the only people who have the power to solve them.
Hartwell stood as well, smoothing down his expensive suit. Think about it, Ms. Chen. The offer stands.
He walked to the door, then paused.
Oh, and Ms. Chen? You might want to look into what happened to that factory worker's daughter in Toledo. The one who's been asking questions about her father's death. I hear she's been having some accidents lately. Jenny, it's Maya. I need you to put a protective detail on someone in Toledo.
A woman whose father was killed by Nexus.
And I need you to do it now. Maya, what's going on? The flame is spreading. And they're trying to snuff it out one person at a time.
That night, Maya sat in her apartment, staring at the wall covered with newspaper clippings, photos, and documents from her investigation. Red string connected various pieces of evidence, creating a web that looked like something from a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. But every connection was real, every thread led to another crime, another cover-up, another injustice.
Her laptop chimed with a new email.
The subject line read, "From Toledo, thank you." Maya opened it eagerly, expecting good news about the protective detail. Instead, she found a message that made her blood run cold.
Ms. Chen, my name is Rebecca Martinez.
I'm the daughter of the factory worker who was killed for exposing Nexus Industries. I wanted to thank you for everything you've done to get justice for my father. I've been continuing his work, documenting evidence of ongoing environmental crimes in our community. I know it's dangerous, but I can't let his death be meaningless. I have information about new dumping sites, new companies involved in the cover-up.
I'm attaching what I've found so far.
Please don't let them silence me the way they silenced him.
The email was timestamped 2 hours ago. Maya tried to call the number in the signature, but it went straight to voicemail.
She called Agent Morrison again.
Jenny, I need you to do a welfare check on Rebecca Martinez in Toledo. Now. Maya, it's midnight. Can't this wait until?
No, it can't wait.
They're going to kill her. Maya was already throwing clothes into a bag as she spoke.
She wasn't going to let another person die for trying to tell the truth.
She wasn't going to let them extinguish another flame. The drive to Toledo took 3 hours.
Maya pushed her motorcycle to its limits, racing through the night with only her headlight cutting through the darkness. She'd called ahead to the local police, but she didn't trust them. Hartwell had been right about one thing: the corruption went deeper than she'd imagined.
She found Rebecca Martinez's apartment building just as the sun was rising.
It was a modest complex in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't ask too many questions. Maya climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her heart pounding. She knocked on the door of apartment 3B, but there was no answer. She knocked again, harder this time.
"Rebecca? It's Maya Chen from the Detroit Free Press. I got your email." Still no response. Maya tried the door handle and found it unlocked. That was a bad sign.
She pushed the door open and stepped into the apartment. The living room was neat and clean, but there were signs of a struggle: a knocked-over lamp, papers scattered across the floor, a coffee cup spilled on the carpet.
"Rebecca?" Maya called out, though she already knew she was too late.
She found the body in the bedroom. Rebecca Martinez was lying on the bed, her eyes closed, a peaceful expression on her face. It looked like she was sleeping, but Maya could see the small puncture wound on her neck, the telltale sign of a lethal injection.
Maya's hands shook as she called 911, then Agent Morrison. Another person dead, another voice silenced, another flame extinguished.
But as she looked around the room, she saw something that gave her hope: a laptop sitting open on the desk, its screen displaying a half-finished email to 3 different news outlets.
Rebecca had been uploading her evidence when they came for her. She'd been passing on the flame, ensuring that her death wouldn't be meaningless. Maya copied the files to her own drive, then waited for the police to arrive.
She knew what would happen next: they'd rule it a suicide or an overdose, find some way to discredit Rebecca's evidence, and the cover-up would continue. But they'd made a mistake in letting Maya find the body. They'd given her another piece of the puzzle, another thread to follow.
The flame they'd tried to snuff out was already spreading to others. 3 months after Rebecca Martinez's death, Maya's investigation had grown into something she never could have imagined.
The files Rebecca had died protecting revealed a network of companies, officials, and criminals that spanned the entire Great Lakes region. Nexus Industries hadn't been the head of the operation; they'd been just one node in a vast web of corruption that reached into every level of government and industry. Maya had been working with a team of investigative journalists from across the country, sharing information and resources to map out the full scope of the conspiracy. What they'd found was staggering: hundreds of illegal dumping sites, thousands of bribes, dozens of mysterious deaths, and a systematic campaign to poison entire communities for profit. The story was too big for any one newspaper to handle. Maya and her colleagues had coordinated with the FBI, the EPA, and journalists from the New York Times, Washington Post, and Guardian to publish a simultaneous exposé that would be impossible to suppress or discredit. The night before publication, Maya sat in her apartment, reviewing the final draft of her article. The headline read, "The Poison Network: How Corporate America Systematically Poisoned the Great Lakes." It was the story of a lifetime, the kind of journalism that changed the world. But Maya knew it was also the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. The network they were exposing had killed before, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill again. She'd taken precautions: multiple backup copies of the evidence, safe houses arranged by the FBI, security details for all the journalists involved. But she also knew that if the network was as powerful as their investigation suggested, none of that might be enough. Her phone rang. It was Agent Morrison. "Maya, we have a problem. Someone leaked news of the story. The targets know it's coming." "How is that possible?" "We think there's someone inside the investigation feeding them information. We're trying to identify the leak, but in the meantime, you need to get to the safe house. Now." Maya was already moving, grabbing her laptop and the backup drives. "What about the other journalists?" "We're contacting them now. The story still goes live tomorrow morning, but we need to make sure everyone survives the night." When it was over, Maya walked out of the Capitol building into the bright afternoon sun. The fight was far from over, there would be more investigations, more trials, more attempts to silence her. But she'd done what she'd set out to do. She'd exposed the truth, held power accountable, and lit a flame that would continue burning long after she was gone. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for not giving up."
The Martinez family.
Maya smiled and started walking toward her hotel. She had a plane to catch back to Detroit, where she had another story to investigate, another network to expose, another flame to light.
They could cut the root, but they couldn't extinguish the flame.
And as long as there were people like Maya Chen in the world, people who refused to be silenced,